The human hand can build entire worlds. It can craft furniture from raw timber, stitch wounds closed, write symphonies, and cradle a newborn child with a gentleness that defies its capacity for strength. My father's hands did all of these things. They were scarred, calloused, massive things, hands that seemed capable of holding up the sky itself. And for 37 years, those hands held me. Until the day they forgot how I'm sitting in a room that smells of disinfectant and overcooked vegetables, watching those same hands tremble over a puzzle meant for children. The pieces are large, brightly colored, depicting a farm scene with animals and a red barn. My father, Marcus Webb, a man who once built our entire house with those hands, who could disassemble and rebuild a car engine blindfolded, who carved me a rocking horse so detailed it had individual eyelashes, cannot figure out where the pig goes. The nurse smiles at me with practiced sympathy. I've learned to hate that smile. It's the smile that says your father is already gone, even though he's sitting right there, breathing, his heart still beating its steady rhythm against his ribs. Still alive, but somewhere else. Somewhere I cannot follow. How are we doing today, Marcus? The nurse asks, her voice pitched higher than necessary, as if volume and pitch could somehow penetrate the fog that settled over his mind. My father looks up. His eyes, once sharp enough to spot a nail in tall grass, drift past her face without recognition. Then they land on me. For a moment, just a fraction of a second, I think I see something. A flicker. A spark of the man who taught me to ride a bike, who sat up with me during thunderstorms, who cried at my wedding even though he pretended he had something in his eye. Do I know you? He asks. 3 years ago, when the diagnosis came, the doctor used words like progressive and irreversible and eventually. Words that felt abstract, clinical, impossible. My father was only 62. He ran 5 miles every morning. He'd just retired from his construction company, was planning to travel, to build that boat he'd always dreamed about, to finally learn to play the guitar that had been gathering dust in the corner of his workshop for 2 decades. But the brain is not lumber or engine parts. You cannot rebuild what it tears down. You cannot sand away the rough edges of dementia or apply a fresh coat of paint to memory loss. The architecture of the mind, once it begins to crumble, falls in ways that mock all logic, all fairness. All the prayers you whisper into the dark at 3 in the morning when sleep refuses to come. I'm Daniel. I say, like I've said 1,000 times before. I'm your son. He studies my face with the curiosity of someone examining a stranger on a bus. You look like someone, he says finally. Can't remember who. The nurse touches my shoulder. Another gesture I've come to hate. I want to shout at her, at all of them, that this man raised me with his bare hands. That he carried me on his shoulders through crowds so I could see the fireworks. That he taught me how to throw a punch and how to apologize, how to change a tire, and how to treat people with dignity. That he worked 3 jobs to keep me in college. That his hands bled from overtime shifts. That he never complained, never faltered, never stopped being the foundation upon which I built my entire life. But she wouldn't understand. How could she? She sees dozens of patients like him, dozens of families like mine. To her, this is Tuesday. To me, this is the end of the world in slow motion. I take the puzzle piece from his shaking fingers, the one with the pig, and gently guide it into place. He smiles, delighted, as if he's accomplished something magnificent. And perhaps he has. Perhaps in the landscape of his diminishing world. Fitting a puzzle piece into its proper slot is equivalent to building a house, writing a symphony, raising a son. Good job, Dad, I say. And the word dad tastes like ash in my mouth because I don't know if he understands what it means anymore, but he pats my hand. His palm is still rough, still strong. The body remembers what the mind forgets. You're a nice young man, he tells me. Very patient. I excuse myself and walk quickly to the bathroom down the hall, where I lock the door and press my forehead against the cool tile wall. I don't cry. I've learned not to cry. Crying requires a kind of release, a catharsis, but there is no release from this. Only the steady accumulation of moments like these, piling up like snow until you can't remember what the ground looked like before it was buried. When I return, my mother is there. She visits every day, has done so for the 2 years since we had to move him into this facility. She's aged a decade in those 2 years. The woman who once ran marathons now moves like she's walking through water. Her hair, which she always kept dyed a rich auburn, has gone gray. Not gradually, not gracefully, but all at once, as if grief could bleach color from follicles. He knew me this morning, she says without preamble, for about 5 minutes. He asked about the garden, whether I'd remembered to water the tomatoes. We haven't had a garden in 3 years. The house was sold to pay for his care. My mother lives with me now, in my spare bedroom, surrounded by boxes of their life together that she can't bear to unpack and can't bear to throw away. That's good, I say, because what else is there to say? She sits beside him, takes his hand. Hello, darling, she says, her voice steady despite everything. He looks at her the way he looked at me. Curious. Blank. A pleasant emptiness where recognition should bloom. Are you the nurse? He asks. My mother's face does something complicated, a topography of pain that shifts and settles into something resembling composure. Yes, she lies. I'm here to check on you. That's nice, he says. My wife should be here soon. Margaret. Do you know Margaret? She's very beautiful. I'm a lucky man. My mother squeezes his hand. She sounds wonderful. Oh, she is. We're going to have children someday. I'm going to build them a tree house. A big one, with multiple rooms and a rope bridge. Margaret thinks I'm crazy, but I'll show her. He's not here anymore. He's somewhere in 1984, before I was born, when the future was still a blank canvas and his hands were young and certain. In that moment, I both love and hate the disease for giving him this mercy. This escape into a past where loss hadn't happened yet, where Margaret is still waiting, where the child he'll name Daniel is still just a hope and a prayer. Why mother stays for 3 hours, letting him tell her about plans that already happened, about dreams that already came true and then crumbled. She laughs at his jokes, asks questions about this past future he inhabits, holds his hand like it's the most natural thing in the world to be forgotten by someone you've loved for 43 years. When she finally stands to leave, he thanks her for her kindness. You're very pretty, he tells her. You remind me of my wife. In the parking lot, under a sky-threatening rain, my mother finally breaks. Not with sobs or wails, but with a sound so small and lost that it barely qualifies as sound at all. I hold her while she shakes, this woman who gave birth to me, who is now smaller than I am, lighter, as if grief is burning away everything but the essential core of her. I should have told him I loved him more, she whispers into my shoulder, when he could still understand what it meant. He knew, Mom. He knows. But I don't know if that's true. I don't know what he knows anymore. I don't know what remains in that vast landscape of forgetting. What memories still cling to the edges before sliding into the void. That night, I drive home through streets slick with rain and sit in my car in the driveway for 20 minutes before I can make myself go inside. My wife, Rachel, meets me at the door. She doesn't ask how it went. She knows. She can read it in the slump of my shoulders, the hollowness behind my eyes. The kids want to say goodnight, she says gently. My children. Emma, 7. Jacob, 5. They barrel into me with the uncomplicated joy of beings who still believe the world is fundamentally good. That people you love will always love you back. That daddies and grandpas are permanent fixtures in the landscape of life. Did you see Grandpa? Emma asks, her arms around my neck. I did. Did you tell him about my spelling test? I got all the words right. That's wonderful, sweetheart. When is Grandpa coming home? Jacob asks. I want to show him my Lego tower. Rachel intervenes smoothly, redirecting them toward bathrooms and toothbrushes and bedtime stories. I follow, going through the motions of normalcy, reading about talking animals and brave children while my mind is still in that room that smells of disinfectant, watching my father's hands tremble over a puzzle for children. Later, after the kids are asleep, Rachel finds me in my father's workshop. We live in the house my parents sold, bought it at a discount that felt both generous and devastating. The workshop came with the property, and I couldn't bring myself to change it. All his tools still hang on their pegboards, organized with the precision of a man who believed that a place for everything and everything in its place was the foundation of a good life, that I'm holding the rocking horse he made for me. It's been in this workshop for decades, carefully preserved, waiting for grandchildren who my father will never know are his grandchildren. Emma asked me today if Grandpa was going to die. Rachel says from the doorway. What did you tell her? I told her the truth. That Grandpa's mind is sick, and someday his body will stop working. But that he had a good life, and that he loves her very much. Does he? I ask, and the bitterness in my voice surprises us both. Can you love someone you don't remember? Rachel comes to stand beside me, her hand on my back. I think love exists in places deeper than memory. In the body, in the bones. In the way his face lights up when you walk in, even if he doesn't know your name. That's just biological response. Neurons firing. Chemicals. Maybe, she says. Or maybe love is the last thing to go. I want to believe her. I want to believe that somewhere in the ruins of my father's mind, beneath the rubble of forgotten names and vanished faces, there's a foundation that still holds. That the love he built into me with those hands, through thousands of small actions repeated over decades, is too deeply embedded to be erased by something as pedestrian as dying brain cells. But I've watched him look at me like I'm a stranger. I've heard him ask my mother if his wife will be visiting soon. I've seen him panic in the middle of the night, screaming about needing to get home, unable to comprehend that he is home, or that home is a concept that no longer has meaning in the fog that's consumed him. The next week, I bring Emma and Jacob to visit. Against my better judgment, against the advice of the social worker who gently suggested that it might be traumatic for children to see their grandfather this way. But Emma has been asking, and I remember how my father was with them before. How he'd get down on the floor, his knees creaking, to play with blocks and dolls and toy cars. How he'd read the same story 17 times without complaint. How he'd called them his second chance, his bonus round, his greatest joy in old age. The facility has a small garden, and that's where we find him, sitting in a wheelchair in the sun. He's lost weight. His clothes hang on him like they're borrowed from a larger man. But his face, when we approach, registers something like pleasure at the sight of children. "Hello," he says, smiling at Emma and Jacob. "Aren't you two beautiful?" Emma, who has been briefed, who understands at 7 what took me 37 years to accept, climbs carefully into his lap. "Hi, Grandpa Marcus." He doesn't correct her assumption that he's her grandfather. Perhaps somewhere, in some dim recess, he knows. Or perhaps he's simply a man who has always liked children, and these two are no different from any others. Jacob is more hesitant. He hangs back, holding my hand, studying this stranger with his grandfather's face. "It's okay," I whisper. "He's still Grandpa. Just different." My father lets Emma chatter at him about school and friends and the butterfly she saw yesterday. He nods and smiles, understanding perhaps one word in 10, but responding to the music of her voice, the brightness of her presence. And for those 15 minutes in the garden, with the sun warm on all of us, I can almost pretend that this is normal. Just a grandfather and his grandchildren, enjoying a spring morning. Then Jacob asks, "Grandpa, why don't you remember Daddy?" The question hangs in the air like a dropped glass, that moment before impact when everything holds still. My father looks at me, really looks at me, and for the first time in months, I see confusion rather than blankness. As if he knows he's supposed to know something, but can't quite grasp what. "I'm sorry," he says, and his voice cracks. "I can't remember much these days." "It's okay, Dad." I tell him, and I mean it. In this moment, I actually mean it. Because he knows enough to apologize, to recognize that forgetting is a wound he's inflicting, however involuntarily. That awareness, painful as it is, feels like a gift. Emma hugs him tighter. "It's okay, Grandpa. We'll remember for you." And that's when I understand what Rachel meant about love existing in places deeper than memory. Because my daughter, 7 years old, just learned the most important lesson my father ever taught me. That you show up anyway. That you love people even when it hurts. That you hold on to what matters, even when the world is doing everything it can to pry your fingers loose. 3 months later, my father stops speaking almost entirely. The words are gone, locked behind a door he can no longer find the key to. He still smiles sometimes, still responds to music, still seems to enjoy the sensation of sunlight on his face. But the man who could explain quantum physics and recite Yeats and tell stories that made you believe in magic has been reduced to syllables and sounds that I read to him now. It's the only thing I know how to do. I bring books from his library, the ones I found in his workshop with his notes in the margins, evidence of a mind that once ranged across vast territories of knowledge. I read Hemingway and Whitman and technical manuals on carpentry. I read the book he read to me every night when I was 4, about a runaway bunny and a mother who would follow him anywhere that I don't know if he understands. I don't know if the words penetrate whatever fog has settled over his consciousness. But I read anyway, because I need him to know that I'm here, that I showed up, that he didn't raise me with his bare hands only for me to abandon him when those hands started shaking. Why mother stops visiting as frequently. Not because she loves him less, but because she's learned that sometimes love means letting go. She started going to a support group, started seeing a therapist, started the long process of grieving someone who hasn't died yet. She encourages me to do the same, but I can't. Not yet. Not while he's still breathing, still here in whatever diminished capacity remains. I've become obsessed with the question of what remains when memory is gone. If my father can't remember building our house, does the house cease to exist? If he can't remember holding me as a baby, does that moment vanish from the fabric of reality? Or does it persist somehow, encoded not in neurons and synapses, but in the shape of the world itself, in the way I hold my own children, in the gentleness I learned from his hands? One Tuesday in October, I get the call I've been expecting and dreading for 2 years. My father has pneumonia. His body, weakened by years of decline, is struggling. They've made him comfortable, the nurse says. Using that phrase that means we're watching him die. I drive too fast, breaking every speed limit, as if speed could somehow reverse time, could bring me to a moment before this moment, where my father still stands strong and certain, his hands steady, his mind clear. But time only moves in one direction, and when I arrive, breathless and terrified, my father is already somewhere past reaching. He's unconscious, breathing shallow and labored. My mother is there, holding one of his hands. I take the other. They're still rough, still strong, still the hands that built everything I am. I told him you were coming, my mother says quietly. I told him to wait for you. I don't know if he can hear me. The doctors say that hearing is often the last sense to go, that we should speak to him, that some part of him might still be listening even as the rest shuts down. So I talk. I tell him about Emma's latest school project, about Jacob learning to ride a bike, about the treehouse I'm planning to build in our backyard. I tell him about the rocking horse, still perfect after all these years, waiting for grandchildren and great-grandchildren. I tell him things he already knows and things he forgot, and things he never had the chance to know. I tell him about the day he taught me to use a hammer, how patient he was when I bent nail after nail, how he never got frustrated, never made me feel stupid. I tell him about the time I crashed his car and was terrified to tell him, and how he just checked that I was okay, and then said we'd figure out the rest together. I tell him about my wedding day, how he cried when he walked me down the aisle, how his hand shook when he placed mine in Rachel's, as if he was handing over something precious and irreplaceable. I tell him that he was a good father, the best father, that he taught me everything that matters, that his hands built more than houses and furniture and rocking horses. They built me. They built the way I move through the world, the way I treat people, the way I love my children with a fierceness that sometimes scares me. I tell him I'm sorry. Sorry for the times I was ungrateful, for the teenage years when I rolled my eyes at his advice, for all the moments I took for granted because I thought we'd have forever. Sorry that I couldn't fix this, couldn't stop the disease that stole him piece by piece, couldn't find a way to make him remember my name. And then I tell him the thing I've been unable to say for 3 years, the thing that's been lodged in my throat like a stone. It's okay to let go, Dad. We'll be okay. Mom will be okay. I'll take care of her, I promise. And I'll tell your grandkids about you. I'll tell them about the man you were before the forgetting. I'll make sure they know that they come from strength, from kindness, from hands that could build anything. His breathing changes, slows. My mother squeezes his other hand, tears streaming down her face, whispering things meant only for him. Words from 43 years of marriage that I have no right to hear. Marcus Webb dies at 4:37 in the afternoon on a Tuesday in October, with his wife and son holding his hands. The same hands that built a house, that rebuilt car engines, that carved a rocking horse with individual eyelashes. The hands that raised me. In the days that follow, there are arrangements to make, people to notify, a funeral to plan. I move through it all in a fog not unlike the one that consumed my father, functioning but not quite present. People say kind things. They tell stories about him, about his generosity, his work ethic, his terrible jokes. They say he's in a better place now, that at least he's not suffering anymore, that death was a mercy after what the disease did to him. And maybe they're right. Maybe it was mercy, but it doesn't feel like mercy. It feels like robbery. Like the universe reached down and took the person I needed most. Took him twice, first his mind and then his body, leaving me with nothing but memories that he couldn't share. Moments that existed only in my head because his had been wiped clean. The funeral is large. My father knew everyone, helped everyone, left his mark on every corner of our town. Person after person approaches me with stories. The house he built for their family. The car he fixed when they couldn't afford a mechanic. The advice he gave. The time he spent. The kindness he showed. And I realized that my father's hands built more than I knew. They built a community. They built a legacy. They built love into the world in so many forms, in so many places, that his forgetting couldn't erase it. The houses still stand. The cars still run. The kindness still echoes. The reception. An old man approaches me. He's 90, if he's a day, moving carefully with a cane. He introduces himself as Frank Morrison, says he knew my father from the Veterans Hall. Your daddy built my house, he tells me, his voice rough with age. Back in '78. Beautiful work. Never had a single problem with it. I told him he could have charged me twice what he did, and he just laughed and said he didn't build houses for money. He built them to last. He looks at me with rheumy eyes that have seen too much. I heard about the Alzheimer's. Must have been hard, watching him forget. It was, I admit. Frank nods slowly. My wife had it. Went the same way. But let me tell you something your father told me, back when my Mary was in the thick of it. He said, a man isn't just his memories. He's every life he touched, every person he helped, every bit of good he put into the world. That stuff doesn't forget, even when he does. I stare at this old man, this stranger who knew my father, and something inside me breaks open. Because he's right. My father was right. The forgetting didn't erase him. It couldn't. He's in the house I live in the hands I use to build things, in the way I love my children, in the patience I show when they bend nail after nail, in the stories I'll tell about a man who raised me with his bare hands. That night, unable to sleep, I go out to the workshop. I find the rocking horse, run my hands over the wood my father's hands shaped. And for the first time since he asked, do I know you? I let myself cry. Really cry. The kind of crying that comes from somewhere deep, somewhere primal. The howl of a child who has lost his father and the grief of a man who had to watch it happen in slow motion. But after the crying, after the storm has passed, I feel something else. Not peace exactly, not acceptance, but something like understanding. My father lived 65 years. For 62 of them, he was fully himself, fully present, building and creating and loving with those remarkable hands. The disease took 3 years. 3 years out of 65. And as much as those 3 years hurt, as much as they stole, they don't erase the other 62. That I think about what Frank Morrison said, what my father apparently believed, that a man is more than his memories. That we exist in the impact we have, in the ripples we create, in the structures we build that outlast our ability to remember building them. My father couldn't remember my name. But he remembered how to smile at children. He remembered how to be kind to nurses. He remembered, in some wordless, bodiless way, how to take comfort in a held hand, in sunlight, in the sound of a voice reading to him. And maybe that's enough. Maybe that has to be enough. The next morning, I start building the treehouse. The one my father planned but never got to make. The one he told my mother about when he thought he was still 25 and childless and full of future. I use his tools, hung carefully on their pegboards. I use his techniques, the ones he taught me over years of patient instruction. I use his philosophy. Build things to last. Build things with love. Build things that will outlive you. Emma and Jacob help, handing me nails, holding boards, asking 1,000 questions. I answer each one the way my father would have, with patience, with enthusiasm, with the understanding that teaching children is one of the most important forms of construction there is. Why are we building this, Daddy? Jacob asks, struggling with a board that's too heavy for his 5-year-old arms. I take the board, position it carefully. Because Grandpa wanted to build you a treehouse. And even though he can't anymore, we can build it for him. We can make something that will be here long after we're gone. Something your kids and your kids' kids will use. That's what Grandpa taught me. You build things that last. Will Grandpa ever see it? Emma asks, and there's hope in her voice that breaks my heart. No, sweetheart. Grandpa died. But in a way, he'll always see it, because it's made from his plans, using his tools, following his lessons. Every nail we hammer is a little bit of him. She considers this seriously, her face scrunched in concentration. So when we use the treehouse, it's like Grandpa is still here? Yeah, I say, and my voice catches. Yeah, exactly like that. We work all day, into the evening, until Rachel calls us in for dinner. The treehouse isn't finished, won't be finished for weeks. But its skeleton stands there in the oak tree behind our house. A promise, a memorial, a testament to hands that could build anything. That night, as I'm putting Emma to bed, she asks me to tell her a story about Grandpa Marcus. Not from the end, from the forgetting time, but from before. From when he was whole. I tell her about the day he taught me to swim. How I was terrified of the water. How I clung to the edge of the pool and cried. How he didn't push me, didn't mock me, didn't lose patience. He just got in the water with me, day after day, week after week, showing me that I was safe, that he wouldn't let me drown, that fear was something we could face together. And one day, I tell her, I just let go of the edge. And his hands were there, right under me, ready to catch me if I sank. But I didn't sink. I floated. And then I swam. And when I looked back at him, he was crying. He was so proud. Why was he crying if he was happy? Emma asks. Because sometimes we cry when we're happy. When something we wanted so badly finally happens. When someone we love overcomes something hard. Grandpa cried a lot when he was happy. When you were born, when your brother was born, at my wedding. His tears were just another way of saying, I love you. She hugs her stuffed bear tighter. I miss him, Daddy. Me too, baby. Me too. Even though he forgot you. Even though he forgot me. Because I remember him. And as long as I remember, he's not really gone. It's a platitude, the kind of thing people say at funerals. But saying it to my daughter, in the dark of her bedroom, with the treehouse taking shape outside her window, it feels true. Not completely true. Not enough to stop the hurting true. But true enough to keep going. A month later, I'm going through boxes from my parents' house, sorting things for donation, for keeping, for passing on to my children someday. I find a leather journal I've never seen before, worn and cracked with age. Inside, in my father's distinctive handwriting, are entries dating back 40 years that they're not daily entries. Sometimes months pass between them, but they're all addressed to me. Daniel turned 3 today, one reads. He insisted on helping me build the deck. Mostly he just handed me the wrong tools and talked my ear off about dinosaurs. It took me twice as long to finish. Best day I've had in years. I flipped forward, my hands shaking. Daniel started high school today. Drove him there myself. He pretended to be annoyed that I wouldn't let him take the bus, but I saw him watching me in the rearview mirror. Still my little boy, even though he's taller than me now. Told him I loved him. He rolled his eyes. I don't care. He needs to hear it anyway. More pages, years condensed into paragraphs. Daniel graduated college today. Business degree. He wants to work in finance. Can you imagine? My son, who I raised in sawdust and workshop debris, is going to wear a suit to work. Margaret says I should be disappointed, but I'm not. I didn't raise him to be me. I raised him to be whatever he wants to be. He's kind, honest, hardworking. That's all that matters. His hands might never build a house, but they'll build a life. That's enough. The last entry is dated 3 months before his diagnosis. I'm forgetting things, it says. Small things. Names of tools. Where I put my keys. Margaret thinks I'm just getting old, and maybe I am. But there's something different about these forgettings. They feel more permanent somehow. More final. I'm scared, if I'm being honest. Scared of losing myself. Scared of losing her. Scared of becoming a burden. But mostly I'm scared of forgetting Daniel. Of forgetting what it felt like to hold him for the first time. This tiny thing that Margaret and I made. Of forgetting his first word, his first steps. The first time he built something with his own hands and looked at me with such pride that I thought my heart would burst. If I do forget. If this fear turns out to be prophetic. I need to write this down now, while I still can. Daniel, you were the best thing I ever built. Every house I constructed, every engine I rebuilt, every piece of furniture I crafted, was practice for the most important construction of my life, raising you. You were patient and strong and kind, not because those traits came naturally, but because we worked on them together. You were my masterpiece. If I forget you, please know it's not because you weren't worth remembering. You were worth everything. You are worth everything. You are the greatest work of my hands, and even if my mind can't hold on to your name, my heart knows you. will always know you. That don't be angry with me when the forgetting comes. Don't blame yourself. Just remember that I loved you with everything I had, for as long as I could. And that love doesn't end just because I can't remember it started. Build things, Daniel. Build things that last. Build things with love. And when you build them, know that you're using hands I helped shape, using lessons I taught you, using a foundation I spent 37 years constructing. That I'm proud of you. I was proud of you when you were 3 and handing me the wrong tools. I was proud of you when you were 15 and rolling your eyes at me. I'm proud of you now, and I'll be proud of you always, even if I can't remember why. Your father, Marcus Webb. I closed the journal carefully, as if it might crumble to dust. And I understand, finally, what my father knew before the disease took him. That memory is just one way of carrying love forward. That there are other ways. The things we build, the people we raise, the lessons we teach, the patience we show, the hands we hold, the trees we plant knowing we'll never see them fully grown. That my father couldn't remember my name, but he remembered how to love. Even in the fog, even in the forgetting that remained. It was there in his smile when I visited, in the way he responded to my voice, in the comfort he took from a held hand. The architecture of love, it turns out, is built so deep that even Alzheimer's can't fully demolish it. I take the journal with me to the treehouse. It's nearly finished now, sturdy and safe, built to last. I hammer the final nails, securing the last board, and I think about my father's hands. How they held me when I was born. How they guided mine when I was learning. How they shook over a child's puzzle in his final years. How they finally went still. Those hands are gone now. But what they built remains. In lumber and nails, yes. But more importantly, in me. In the way I hold my children. In the patience I learned from watching him work. In the belief that the things worth doing are worth doing with care. With attention, with love. I stand in the treehouse, looking out over my backyard, over the house my father built, over the town where his kindness echoed. And I understand that this, all of this, is how we survive forgetting. We build things that outlast us. We love people so thoroughly that the love becomes structural, load-bearing, the foundation that holds after we're gone. My father raised me with his bare hands. He taught me to build, to create, to construct things that would last. And even though he forgot my name, even though the disease took him piece by piece, he succeeded. Because the thing he built most carefully, most lovingly, most completely, was me. And I will stand, long after his hands have stilled. I will build, using the lessons he taught me. I will love my children the way he loved me. I will show them that strength isn't about never breaking, but about holding on even when everything is falling apart. I will be living proof that some things survive forgetting. I am my father's son. His hands built me, and nothing, not even death, not even dementia, can unbuild what he made. The treehouse stands in the oak tree, solid and strong. Inside it, I've hung a small plaque that reads, "Built by Daniel Webb." For his children, using tools and techniques from Marcus Webb, who knew that the best things we build are the people we love. Later that evening, after the kids are asleep, I return to the workshop one last time. I pick up my father's hammer, feel its weight in my palm. It fits my hand like it was made for me. In a way, it was. Rachel finds me there an hour later, sitting on my father's workbench, holding that hammer like it's a lifeline. She doesn't ask if I'm okay. She knows I'm not. Instead, she sits beside me, her shoulder against mine. And we exist in that silence that married people learn to share. The silence that says more than words could. I keep thinking about all the things I should have asked him. I finally say. About his childhood, about his parents, about what he dreamed about when he was young. I had 37 years to ask, and I thought there'd always be more time. You know what he would say? Rachel asks gently. He'd say you asked the questions that mattered. How to be kind. How to work hard. How to love someone. Those were the questions you asked him every day, just by watching how he lived. She's right. My father taught me more through demonstration than conversation. He showed me how to treat a woman by the way he treated my mother, with respect and tenderness and partnership. He showed me how to be a father by being one, present and patient and proud. He showed me how to face hardship by facing his own with dignity, even when that hardship was losing himself piece by piece. The night before we moved him to the facility, I tell Rachel, I stayed late at their house. He was having a good day, relatively speaking. He still knew who I was. And I asked him if he was scared. Of the forgetting. of what was coming. Rachel waits, giving me space to continue. He said he wasn't scared of forgetting the big things. The births and weddings and graduations. Those were already gone. He could feel them slipping. What scared him was forgetting the small things. The way Mom laughed when she was really amused, not just being polite. The smell of sawdust in his workshop. The sound of my voice when I called him Dad. He said those were the things that made life worth living, and the disease was taking them first. The quiet moments that nobody photographs or writes down. I turned the hammer over in my hands, studying it. There's a dent in the handle where my father dropped it once, years ago, working on the deck. He refused to replace it. Said the dent made it his, gave it character. I told him I'd remember for him. I continue. All those small things. I'd keep them safe. And he smiled, this sad smile, and said, "That's what children are for, Daniel. To be the keepers of things we can't hold on to anymore." Rachel takes my hand, threads her fingers through mine. "Then that's what you'll do. You'll keep those small things safe. And you'll pass them on to Emma and Jacob, and they'll pass them on to their children. That's how memory survives when the mind can't hold it anymore. It becomes collective. It becomes family." We sit there in my father's workshop, surrounded by tools that still remember the shape of his hands, even if he couldn't remember the shape of my face. And I think about inheritance, about what we pass down that matters more than money or property or possessions. My father gave me his hands, in a way. Not literally, of course, but the knowledge they held, the skills they developed, the gentleness they learned. When I build something, I'm using techniques he taught me. When I hold my children, I'm using patience he modeled. When I face something difficult, I'm using strength he demonstrated. The forgetting couldn't take that. Disease can destroy neurons and sever synapses and dissolve the electrochemical processes that constitute thought and memory. But it can't destroy what's been passed on, what's been embedded in another person. In that way, my father survived his own forgetting. He survives still, in me, in my children, in everyone he touched. The weeks turn into months. The sharp edge of grief becomes something I can live with, something I carry rather than something that carries me. I finish the treehouse. Emma and Jacob spend hours there, creating imaginary worlds, building their own memories in a structure built from their grandfather's plans. My mother begins to heal, in her way. She starts painting again, something she gave up when my father got sick, when all her energy went toward caring for him. Her paintings are abstract, swirls of color that seem to capture emotion rather than form. When I ask her what they're about, she says they're about forgetting and remembering simultaneously, about how those two things can coexist. "Your father taught me that," she tells me one afternoon, in her makeshift studio in my garage. Near the end, he couldn't remember anything concrete, but he remembered feelings. He'd see a sunset and feel joy, even if he couldn't name the colors. He'd hear music and feel moved, even if he couldn't remember hearing it before. The capacity for emotion survived the forgetting. Asterisk, asterisk, she dips her brush in crimson paint, makes a sweeping gesture across the canvas. I'm trying to paint that. The feeling of love when the details are gone. The shape of a life after the facts have faded. I watch her work. This woman who spent 43 years with my father, who had to relearn how to be herself after being half of a whole for so long. She's stronger than I gave her credit for. Resilient in ways I'm only beginning to understand. Do you regret it? I ask, knowing how it ended. If you could go back, would you still marry him? She doesn't hesitate. Every time. Every version of that life. I'd choose him in every possible universe, even knowing the pain that was waiting at the end. Because the love was worth it, Daniel. 40 years of love was worth 3 years of loss. Her answer settles something in me, some question I didn't know I was asking. Because I've been angry at the universe for what it did to my father, for the cruelty of a disease that steals people slowly, that makes you lose them twice. But my mother is right. The years of having him were worth the years of losing him. I start a project of my own. Using my father's journal as a starting point, I begin collecting stories about him. I interview people who knew him, who worked with him, who were helped by him. Frank Morrison tells me about the house my father built for him, how it withstood 2 hurricanes without a crack. Mrs. Chun from the Veterans Hall tells me about the time my father spent 6 months helping her disabled son build a wheelchair ramp, coming over every weekend, refusing payment, just showing up because it needed to be done. A woman named Sarah approaches me at the grocery store. She's about my age, vaguely familiar in the way people from your hometown always are. "You're Marcus Webb's son," she says. It's not a question. I am. "Your father saved my life," she says simply. "I was 16, my parents had just died in a car accident, and I was staying with an aunt who didn't want me. I was planning to run away, maybe worse. Your father found me crying behind the high school one night. He was there working on the new gymnasium they were building. He sat with me for 3 hours. Just sat there, listening, not judging, not trying to fix everything. Just being present." Her eyes are wet now. "He told me that sometimes the only thing you can do is survive until tomorrow, and then survive until the next tomorrow, and eventually you look back and realize you've survived a whole life." He gave me his phone number, told me to call anytime, day or night, if I needed someone. I called him twice that year. Both times he answered. Both times he talked me through the dark. I didn't know. I say, because I didn't. This is a whole part of my father's life I never witnessed. Acts of kindness performed in quiet moments when no one was watching. He probably helped dozens of people like me, Sarah says. People nobody else noticed. He had this gift for seeing people who were falling through the cracks and catching them before they hit bottom. I teach now, high school English, and I look for those kids, the ones who are struggling silently. I try to be for them what your father was for me. That's his legacy, you know, not just his buildings or his family, but all the people he taught to be kind, to show up, to catch the ones who are falling. She squeezes my arm and walks away, leaving me standing in the produce section, crying into a display of apples, understanding for the first time the full scope of what my father built. Not just structures of wood and nail, but structures of compassion, networks of care that extended far beyond what I could see from my vantage point as his son. I add Sarah's story to my collection. It grows into something substantial, this archive of my father. I organize it chronologically, thematically, adding photos and documents and his journal entries. It becomes a project that consumes my evenings, this act of reconstruction, of building a more complete picture of the man who couldn't remember himself. Rachel worries I'm obsessing, that I'm stuck in grief rather than moving through it. Maybe she's right, but this doesn't feel like stuckness. It feels like responsibility. My father asked me to remember the small things, and I'm discovering that those small things were bigger than either of us knew. On what would have been my father's 66th birthday, I take Emma and Jacob to visit his grave. We bring flowers, yellow roses because those were his favorite, though he could never remember why. We sit on the grass beside the headstone, and I tell them stories. About the time Grandpa built me a go-kart from scratch and it fell apart on its first trip down the hill, and instead of being angry, he laughed until he cried and said, "Well, now we know what not to do." About the time he threw out his back, trying to move a couch by himself because he was too stubborn to ask for help, and how Grandma made him rest for a week, and how he was the worst patient in the history of medicine, constantly trying to sneak out to his workshop. About the time he punched a man for using a racial slur at the hardware store, got arrested for disturbing the peace, and came home with a black eye and absolutely no regrets. Some things are worth fighting for, he told 12-year-old me. Human dignity is one of them. Grandpa got in a fight. Jacob asks, eyes wide. Just that once. He wasn't a violent man, but he also wasn't a man who could watch someone being hurt and do nothing. That's important. Being kind doesn't mean being passive. Sometimes kindness means standing up, even when it costs you something. Emma traces the letters on the headstone with her finger. Marcus Anthony Webb, beloved husband, father, and friend. The dates of his life, reduced to 2 numbers and a dash. What does it mean to be beloved, she asks. It means that people loved him, that his life touched other lives in ways that made them better, that even though he's gone, what he built into the world remains. Like the treehouse. Like the treehouse, I agree. But also like kindness and patience, and the belief that you should build things to last. Those are things Grandpa built into me, and I'm building them into you, and someday you'll build them into your children. We sit in silence for a while, the 3 of us, visiting a man who exists now only in stories and memories, and the ways he shaped the people who knew him. The sun is warm, the grass is green, and somewhere in the distance I can hear the sound of construction, someone building something, hammer striking nail, the sound my father heard every day of his working life. That night, I have a dream about my father. He's in his workshop, young and strong, his hands steady as he planes a piece of wood. I'm there too, my current age, watching him work. I'm sorry I forgot you, he says without looking up from his work. It's okay, Dad. It wasn't your fault. I know, but I'm still sorry. I missed so much at the end. Your kids growing up. Your life continuing. I was there, but not there. Present, but absent. You were there enough, I tell him. You taught me everything I needed to know before the forgetting started. And even in the fog, even when you couldn't remember my name, you were still teaching me. About grace under pressure. About dignity in decline. About how love persists even when memory doesn't. He finally looks up, and his eyes are clear, sharp, the way they were before. You're a good man, Daniel. You're a good father. Better than I was, maybe. That's not possible, I say. You were the best. He smiles, this sad, knowing smile. That's what every child thinks about their father, if the father did his job right. And I did do it right, didn't I? I raised you to be strong and kind and capable of building your own life. That's all a father can hope for. I miss you. I tell him, and my voice breaks. Every day I miss you. I know, but I'm not really gone. Look at your hands, Daniel. I look down. My hands are rough, calloused from the work on the treehouse, scarred in places from minor mishaps with tools and materials. They look like my father's hands. They are my father's hands, in a way. Carriers of his knowledge, his skills, his gentle strength. You carry me forward, he says. Every time you build something, every time you're patient with your children, every time you show up when it would be easier not to. That's me surviving death, surviving forgetting. Through you. I wake up with tears on my face and Rachel's arm across my chest. She's awake too, or wakes when I do, because she holds me tighter without saying anything. And I understand that this is also something my father taught me, by example. How to be with someone in their grief, not trying to fix it or minimize it, just being present, just holding on. The years pass. Emma turns 8, then 9, then 10. Jacob grows tall and clumsy, all elbows and knees and endless energy. The treehouse becomes their sanctuary, the place where they escape adult supervision and create worlds of their own imagining. Sometimes I stand beneath it, looking up at the structure I built from my father's plans, and I feel something like peace. My mother eventually moves into her own apartment, small but filled with light, perfect for her painting. She joins a book club, starts volunteering at the library, slowly rebuilds a life that's hers alone. She still misses my father. Will always miss him. But she's learned what he tried to teach me in that dream. That grief and joy can coexist, that loss doesn't preclude happiness, that we can carry our dead with us without being crushed by their weight. I continue collecting stories about my father. The project has taken on a life of its own. People hear about it and reach out with their own memories. The collection grows from a binder to a box to multiple boxes. Acts of kindness I never knew about. Lives touched in ways I never witnessed. A man I thought I knew completely revealing himself to be even larger, even more generous than I imagined. One story in particular strikes me. A man named Thomas calls me, says he was in prison with my father. I'm confused at first, because my father was never incarcerated. Thomas explains, my father volunteered for a prison outreach program, teaching construction skills to inmates preparing for release. I was 23 years old, serving time for drug possession. Thomas tells me over the phone, angry at the world, convinced my life was over before it had really started. Your father came in every Tuesday for 2 years, teaching us carpentry. He treated us like we mattered, like we had value, like we were people who had made mistakes rather than being mistakes. Thomas pauses, and I hear emotion in his voice. When I got out, he gave me a job. Let me work for his construction company, taught me the trade properly, gave me a chance when nobody else would. I've been a contractor for 15 years now. I have my own business, 3 employees, a good reputation. All because your father saw something in me worth saving. I never knew he did that. I say. The prison program. He didn't talk about it much. He said charity wasn't charity if you bragged about it. But Daniel, you need to know, he changed my life. And I wasn't the only one. There were dozens of us, men who came through that program, who got second chances because your father believed in redemption. After we hang up, I sit with this new information, this revelation about my father's life. How many hours did he spend teaching prisoners, working with addicts, helping people society had written off? How many lives did he change that I knew nothing about? And I realize this is the ultimate lesson my father taught me, that a life well lived extends far beyond what's visible to those closest to us. That we build things, touch lives, create ripples that extend outward in ways we'll never fully comprehend. My father couldn't remember my name at the end, but somewhere in the world, there's a man named Thomas building houses, teaching his own employees, creating his own ripples. All because my father showed up on Tuesdays and treated prisoners like people. I start volunteering at the Veterans Hall, taking over some of my father's duties there. I'm not nearly as skilled as he was, not as patient, not as naturally generous. But I try. I show up. I fix things that are broken, help people who need help. Listen to stories from old men who have too many stories and too few people willing to hear them. One of these men, a veteran named Carl who served in Vietnam, tells me that my father once said something that stuck with him. We're all building two things in life. We're building what we can see, the houses and careers and families. But we're also building what we can't see, the character and kindness and love that survive us. The second thing is more important, even though nobody gives us blueprints for it. Your father understood that, Carl says, his hands shaking slightly as he sips coffee from a styrofoam cup. He wasn't building houses, not really. He was building a better world, one act of kindness at a time. That's why we all loved him. That's why this place feels emptier without him. I think about this constantly now, this idea of invisible construction. The houses my father built will eventually fall down, be demolished, be replaced. But the kindness he showed, the people he helped, the lessons he taught, those have a different kind of permanence. They replicate, mutate, spread through the world in ways that can't be measured or photographed or put on a blueprint. On Emma's 11th birthday, she asks if we can add something to the treehouse. She wants to create a memory wall, a place where we can write down stories about Grandpa Marcus. I'm scared I'm going to forget him, she admits. I remember some things, like how his hands felt and how he smelled like wood and how he laughed. But I was so young when he got sick. What if I forget everything? We spend the afternoon weatherproofing sheets of paper, writing down memories, tucking them into a special box Emma designed. She writes about the time Grandpa taught her to hammer a nail, how patient he was when she missed and hit her thumb. Jacob writes about the rocking horse, about how Grandpa made it before Jacob was even born, planning for grandchildren he might never meet. I write about his hands, about how they built everything I am. And as we work together, 3 generations of a family built by one man's steady, patient love, I understand something fundamental. My father didn't forget me. Not really. Because I exist, substantial and real, carrying forward everything he put into me. The disease took his memories, but it couldn't touch his legacy. It couldn't undo what he had already built. That night, lying in bed, I tell Rachel about my conversation with Emma. She's afraid of forgetting him, I say, and I realized I'm afraid of the same thing. Not of forgetting the facts about him, but of forgetting the feeling of him, the essence, the thing that made him him. Rachel turns to face me in the dark. So write it down. Not just the stories, but the feelings. The way his presence felt. The safety you felt when he was around. The confidence his belief in you created. Write it down so Emma and Jacob can read it someday. So they can understand not just what their grandfather did, but who he was. It's good advice. That week, I start a different kind of document. Not a collection of stories from others, but my own remembrances. Not of events, but of sensations. The weight of my father's hand on my shoulder. The timbre of his voice. The particular way he laughed when something genuinely amused him. The smell of his workshop. The sound of his hammer. The feel of his hugs, strong and encompassing and safe. I write about the specific way he said my name, drawing out the first syllable slightly, making it sound like a question and an affirmation simultaneously. I write about how he always checked the stove 3 times before leaving the house, a quirk that used to annoy me, but now feels precious. I write about his terrible singing voice and how he sang anyway, completely unself-conscious. Usually old country songs I'd never heard before. I write about the night I came home from college with my heart broken by a girl who didn't love me back, and how my father sat with me on the back porch until 3 in the morning, not saying much, just being there. His presence a reminder that I would survive this pain because he had survived his own. The document grows longer than I intended. 20 pages. 30. 50. It becomes something between a memoir and a prayer. An attempt to capture in words what can never fully be captured. The experience of being loved by this particular man, in this particular way, during these particular years. When I finish, I print 2 copies. One goes in the memory box in the treehouse. The other I give to my mother. She reads it over the course of a week, calling me when she finishes. "You captured him," she says, her voice thick with tears. "The essence of him. I read this and I can feel him in the room with me. Did I get it right?" I ask. "The feeling of him. You got it perfect. But Daniel, there's something I need to add. Something you didn't know because you couldn't have known. Your father was terrified of being a dad. This surprises me. My father always seemed so confident, so certain in his role. When I got pregnant with you," my mother continues, "he had a panic attack. A full-blown, thought he was dying panic attack. We went to the emergency room. And when the doctors told him it was anxiety, he broke down crying in the hospital corridor. He was convinced he was going to fail you, that he didn't have what it took to be a good father. But he was the best father." I protest. "I know. And he knew too, eventually. But it took work. It took showing up every day, making mistakes, learning, trying again. Being a good father wasn't something that came naturally to him. It was something he built, deliberately, carefully, with the same attention to detail he brought to building houses. You were his most important project, and he approached you that way, with patience and planning and dedication. This revelation shifts something in my understanding of my father. I'd always assumed his parenting was effortless, that he was just naturally good at it. Knowing that he struggled, that he was scared, that he worked at it makes his success even more meaningful. Why are you telling me this now?" I ask. "Because you need to know that you come from a man who was brave enough to be terrified and do the hard thing anyway. That's not weakness, Daniel. That's strength. And you need to know that when you doubt yourself as a father, when you worry that you're not doing enough, you're following in his footsteps. He worried too. He doubted too. But he showed up anyway, every single day, and loved you the best way he knew how." After we hang up, I sit with this new understanding. My father, who seemed invincible, was human, scared, uncertain, but he didn't let that stop him. He felt the fear and built anyway, constructed fatherhood from the ground up, one day at a time, one decision at a time, one moment of patience and love at a time. This is what I want Emma and Jacob to understand. Not that their grandfather was perfect, but that he was human and still managed to build something extraordinary. That we're all making it up as we go, all building without complete blueprints, all hoping that love and effort will be enough. Years continue to pass. Emma enters high school, becomes interested in architecture, wants to design buildings like her grandfather built. I take her to see the houses he constructed, and she photographs them, sketches them, studies the ways he solved problems. The details he included that show he was thinking about the people who would live there, not just the structures themselves.